I do want to say while I'm up here, I've been contacted by some of the biggest companies in the world. And because of what we're doing economically and through tariffs and taxes and incentives, they want to come back into the United States. And we'll be announcing various very large companies, the biggest actually. And they'll be coming back, having to do with chips and having to do also with cars and lots of other things. We're going to be announcing some very, very big momentous decisions are being made by companies all around the world, the biggest, and they want to come back into the U.S.
U.S. President Donald Trump has, of course, rattled markets with his consistent and tough tariff talk. We have seen him mentioning the 25% tariffs on steel and aluminium, the talk on reciprocal tariffs with India, where Trump says, whatever you charge, I'm going to charge. And now more recently, Donald Trump saying that he will introduce 25% tariffs on autos, pharma, and chips. Now, how will this impact the India market at large and the Indian economy? We will, of course, decode all of that. We've got with us Ajay Bagga, market expert, Mitali Nikor, economist. Thank you both for your time. To you, Ajay Bagga, then, we have seen global markets rattled with Donald Trump's announcement, especially after the 25% tariffs on steel and aluminium. And, how do you see that impacting our stock markets going forward?
Yeah, Sakshi, I think the first thing that all countries understand after Trump's first term, that Trump's strategy is shock first, then negotiate, and then try for a deal. Now, the shock will be at 5 to 10 times of what his ultimate outcome is looking at. So that's how all countries are really, approaching the Trump talk. They are trying to negotiate on the ground with the adults in the room. You have a very seasoned person as Secretary of State, another seasoned person heading the Commerce Department. So I think all countries will look more at the actions. This is a weaponized tariff policy. We saw that with Colombia, where he threatened 25% and 10% tariffs, and then Colombia allowed the US planes to land. We saw that with Canada and Mexico, where first he talked of levying 25%, and then once they gave some minor concessions. If you see the size of the Canadian border with the US, 10,000 guards standing there is not going to change much or going to impact the drug supply. But it was a face saving. So that's what most of the markets have factored in. You have not had a major market move. There was a move around February 1st when 25% on Canada and Mexico were announced. But we saw the markets caught up to that very fast once those. So the markets will wait mostly, Sakshi, and we've not had a full impact on the markets yet.
Not had a full impact on the markets yet. Mitali, what do we make of this for the economy then, especially the 25% tariffs he's already imposed on steel and aluminium imports?
Have you decided specifically what the auto tariff rate should be?
Yeah, I probably will tell you that on April 2nd, but it'll be in the neighborhood of 25%.
What about semiconductors and pharmaceuticals?
It'll be 25% and higher, and it'll go very substantially higher over a course of a year. But we want to give them time to come in because, as you know, when they come into the United States and they have their plant or factory here, there is no tariff. So we want to give them a little bit of a chance. Well, they did already, as I understand it, reduce their car tariff all the way down to what we have. And a lot of that will take place, and I think some won't do it and some will do it. But the EU had a 10% tax on cars, and now they have a 2.5% tax, which is the exact same as us. So already we've saved a tremendous amount. That would be great. If everybody would do that, then we'd all be on the same playing field.
So I think, Sakshi, the way I would break it down is we are seeing a very interesting re-engineering of what we call as global supply chains. So at the end of the day, most countries want to supply to the US consumer because you are able to sell your goods for the highest possible price globally in the US. Now, when we look at sectors like aluminium and steel, these are basic sectors. The use of aluminium, particularly in the US, goes to companies which are providing airplane manufacturing, which are doing car manufacturing. Detroit is a big consumer of aluminium and steel. So these clusters, they also need cheap raw materials. There's a reason why these are being imported into the US. So while he's gone ahead and, applied this tariff today, particularly, cutting off China from those supply chains, because China will not only have the 25% product tariff, they'll also have the 10% country tariff, which makes their products far more uncompetitive. There are other countries that will come in and supply and, bridge that supply gap, India being one of them. But at the same time, this will create a very different set of winners and losers. But the one loser which is incontrovertible is the US consumer. Because at the end of the day, whatever is being imported from anywhere, if it's going into auto manufacturing, if it is going into airplane manufacturing, if it is going into any sort of manufacturing for these aluminum and steel, which go into many industries and finished goods, the price of the raw material is going to go up by 25% for the US consumer. So, they will obviously lose out. And when the price is so high for a raw material in the US, that means that those commodities cannot be exported out of the US. So, in a way, he's creating new global centers for manufacturing auto, because it's so difficult to manufacture auto there now.
Very, very interesting there. But, Ajay Bagga, as far as investor sentiment is concerned, when he talks about reciprocal tariff and he says, I will charge you what you charge me, in a sense, as far as, India and US are concerned, what do you feel? How will that impact stock markets? Like you said, is there more room for correction then?
We have to see what are the listed stocks which will get impacted. A lot of our gems and jewelries is in the unlisted space, for example. Textile, there are players supplying, but a lot of it is still unlisted. Auto immediately gets impacted. We are seeing that impact on, say, leading auto manufacturers like Tata Motors. Again, I'm not giving a buy or sell, which I'm not allowed to, but 25% of JLR sales go into the US. So if there is an auto tariff on European cars, for example, JLR gets caught in that. What Mitali said is very true. If you look at how the global supply chains function today, Sakshi, the same auto component could be going into a US factory, coming back in a semi-finished way, and then going into a car and being exported back again to the US. So you could have cascading tariffs. That's why they took a 2 months gap to study it better. Now the automobile value chains were re-engineered in 2018-19 when the first Trump tariffs came in. Now you got new factories sitting in Mexico to move them back to Detroit or other US manufacturing bases. You need to have the workers, you need to have a lot of ecosystem there. And where are your suppliers based? An auto plant doesn't run on its own. It has 2,000 vendors who are supplying to it or maybe shipping to it. You need a nearby port, you need all kinds of things, and then you need a market. So those 8 million cars coming into the US, which is 50% of US consumption, and you start putting duties on that or tariffs on that, it's going to upend the market no end. So I think it will be a lot of noise, a lot of fury talked about, but finally the action will be a whimper. So the EU has sent a negotiator already to the US. They are trying to negotiate their way out of the auto tariffs, for example. EU already has a China issue. Even at 50% tariffs, the EU cars are not able to compete with the Chinese cars. So the real issue is there, not with the Volkswagens and JLRs exporting into the US. It's the Chinese who have got massive subsidies. If India's PLI is 1x, the Chinese PLI is 10x, 15x. There is no cost of capital. There is no returning of bank loans. There is so much subsidy so long as you are generating employment and generating output that there is no comparison any manufacturer can do with the Chinese manufacturer. So it's a complex situation. It's not relevant that you will get an easy solution that he'll put a tariff. And what Mitali said, very true. The US consumer will face higher costs, either the intermediate US manufacturer, semi-finished US manufacturer, or the US consumer. That's the first thing. So inflation will immediately go up, and it could even lead to recession in many parts of the world, including in the US. So this Trump understands. He's a businessman. Again, I'm saying, remember, shock, negotiate, deal. Shock, negotiate, deal. The Koreans got it very well in Trump 1. They just stood their ground and nothing happened finally. Now you will see a lot of the world will stand its ground. The Canadians and Mexicans had to give up. They had already a scenario forecast done that what will we give? And they gave whatever was easy, that we'll police your borders, we will do this, we will do that. Those kind of concessions were given, but moving factories is just not possible. It takes a couple of years, 3 years. Any place in the world apart from China could set up the Tesla factory in 1 year. Nobody else can do that, because it's not only the factory, as I said, you have to have the suppliers, you have to have the workforce there. Where will you set it up? It's not just you say that you move ahead. Like pharma, I'll give you a small example. 20% of the pharma exports into the US are coming from Ireland. Why is it coming from Ireland? Because it's a tax haven. You are getting very good tax concessions there. It's like our Badi and Himachal and all in India, where actually the goods are made elsewhere, but they are showed as made in those to get concessions on taxes. Same way, 20% of your pharma is coming from Ireland, 10% each from Germany and Switzerland. India at $8 billion is a very minuscule. It's about 4 to 5%. Okay, we have 10% tariffs on US pharma. That's about 600 million. We'll give up 60 million for a 4 trillion, 5 trillion economy. It's no big deal. But on 8 billion, if you put 10% or 20%, your healthcare, which is already creaking, will become so unsustainable, because that will mean you will put on the Irish, you will put on the Germans, you'll put on Swiss, you'll put on China. How will you manage it? So practically, it's looking very difficult. Of course, madness as a stated policy has been practiced right from Richard Nixon's time, where you give such an outlandish comment that you shake up the world. So this is insanity as a state policy working. On the economics, it's very difficult to work.
Right. Very interesting points there. And like you said, Donald Trump's agenda could be to shock, negotiate, and then look at deals. So Mitali, do you agree with that? Is this then a step towards negotiation, looking at trade policies afresh, looking at more deals coming in? And when he says, I will introduce 25% tariffs on autos, pharma, and chips, how do you see that impacting the Indian economy?
Right. So I think, Sakshi, let's break this down a little bit, because I know it's quite difficult for even for economists to understand. I think everyone is in a tizzy trying to work out, the impact on each product supply chain. And like Sir said, at the end of the day, this is going to have very differential impacts on different countries. So if I was to put a framework to it and say, how do I analyze something like this? The first thing to think about is, how is this going to impact different countries' output, right? So say if you have a tariff that is imposed on auto or pharma being a major export item from India to the rest of the world, but particularly US, that's a major commodity. Textiles is a major commodity. He's talking about, putting some tariffs on textiles as well under the reciprocal tariff policy, because his next thing is, whatever you impose on me, I impose on you. Now, that is a completely flawed statement, of course, from an economics point of view, because at the end of the day, when you, as a developing country, when we impose something, the cost for us is already higher as a percentage of our GDP or a per capita GDP compared to a developed country like the US. So already our consumers and our population is at a disadvantage, right? And this is the whole negotiation. Like, why is WTO such an explosive forum? The World Trade Organization is an explosive forum because developing countries are constantly trying to explain this to developed countries that, we are already bearing a lot of the cost of trade just because we are poorer, we are more disadvantaged, and every time we import something, we are basically giving away our foreign exchange. And all trade is also done in dollars, right? So that also imposes a cost on us. But if he says, okay, I'm going to put the same rates, then pharma industry is the first one that will take a hit in the Indian context because pharma is one of our major products which is exported. But it's not just the US, right? We are exporting to many countries. So as Sir was saying, think about then the re-engineering of supply chains and say, do you want to go and produce this, good somewhere else to make it more competitive to export to the US, or even do you want to think about onshoring, which is the new trending term these days, right? Onshoring, that you go and you onshore manufacturing of some of these important commodities to the US because you want to retain your consumer. So that becomes a choice for different industrialists. A Serum Institute, for example, which is already doing a lot of manufacturing in the UK to serve a lot of the Europeans and British markets, might again be, a good example here, where some back-end manufacturing takes place in India, but then they also do a bit of onshoring to avoid certain, taxes and regulations which the EU also imposes on them. So every commodity we have to see for each commodity to see what is the impact going to be in terms of employment, in terms of onshoring or offshoring choices, and as Sir said, the relative credibility of the threat. That, if your threat is not credible, then obviously it's not going to make any sense.
Right. So there's really the spotlight on each and every detail, like you said, how this will impact each and every sector. Markets also in wait and watch mode as we were being explained. So really the spotlight on the details. But for now, Trump's tough tariff talk very, very clearly rattling and making investors curious. Thank you both for sharing your thoughts and for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for calling me.
Thank you.